do that. Hi.
We are live. Don't mind me, people. I'm Crow. This
I'm
is Peter. And
this is P&K Q&A for October the 18th. We're just going to let you in on a bit of our preamble. We kind of talk a bit before we go live, usually about what we're going to discuss. So
there's offensive things that you have to deal with on our preamble. So we apologize in advance, but you know what? When you're trying to riddle out truth, there is no topic that is off limits.
Yeah, no, we are completely uncensored here.
Yeah, because, I mean, how do you get to the truth if you're constantly censoring yourself?
Right.
You can't. I mean, shit, we already went through that this week with a article that the Washington Post put out. If y'all don't know, well, a little quote from 1984. You want to know who your overlords are? Find out who you're not allowed to criticize. And guess what? We found out this week who we're not allowed to criticize. And his initials are, let's see, JB and HB. A father-son duo. Actually, it's a whole fucking family of Sopranos is what it is. It's like, it's the worst, it's like the most disgusting thing I've ever seen in my life. And the money is only the surface of it. There was other things found on that laptop that they don't even want to talk about yet. It's just, wow. That's all I can say. So yeah, there's no censorship here. We talk about it all. And Peter texted me earlier and said, we should talk about religion.
Yes, the true nature
of religion. The true nature of religion.
What it's supposed to be for, what it's supposed to be about, and all of that. So yeah.
And so I'll tell you right now, the definition of religion that we think it is, it's not the definition. It's the same thing with the other three words: sin, evil, and inequity. Right? Most people have no idea what.
And we need to talk about what sin actually is, also. But first, religion.
Yeah, we did touch on that a little bit. But even those three words, like, people don't know what they really mean. So you have to go back to their original meaning in order to understand what people were trying to say 2,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago. You can't apply our paradigm to them, because they lived in a completely different paradigm.
Yeah, it's only the last 100 years, and really the last 50, 60, 70 years that the common people have had any kind of idea to understand what Jesus was actually talking about, because we didn't have, they didn't have television, and they didn't have holograms, and they didn't have, our ideas about any of that stuff. And he was using all these words. He had to continually dumb it down, just work around, use thousands of workarounds with his apostles and disciples to even get as far as he did.
Oh,
and it's incredible, actually, when you kind of have an idea of what he was going for and what he had to work with, and what some of us understand now about kind of what cosmic stuff is going on. So.
Yeah. Oh, and if you hear a little hissing sound in the background, that's actually a propane heater that we just got today to heat this shed.
Yeah, it's like -3 in here.
Yeah, you can start to see our breath. Yeah. So when you start to see your breath, that's when you want heat. Mm-hmm. So you might hear a hissing sound. Just, I don't know. We'll see how bad it is when we do the playback.
Yeah, I think the mics are facing front, I think. So computer's probably going to be good. Phone is going through the back camera, so I guess it has a mic. I don't know where all the microphones in an iPhone are, actually, but we'll see what it does. Yeah.
And so, religion. Jesus actually described religion, or defined religion, as good works. More specifically, good works in the community. People need to get past all their religious bullshit, because Jesus was all about the community. All about it. It's like, I mean, his religious works, he he was doing his religious works from a very young age. And it wasn't about teaching spiritual things. That didn't come until later on in his life. Uh, and I dare say that it's pretty much the way my life went, and I'm sure probably Peter has some similar stories. That my missionary work, if you want to call it that, was never about teaching people. I never wanted to teach them. I was told that someday I'd be a great teacher. I laughed at that crazy shit. But my work was always like, we talked a little bit about it, and you've heard me say it, volunteering for Habitat for Humanity, volunteering, to help fix up people. I've got skills in the trades, and I've done like just about everything in the trades. I've been a carpenter, I've been a framer, I've been a plumber, I've been a welder, I've been an electrician, and currently I'm a gas fitter. So I've done it all, and so I've used my skills to help other people, like with their home, because I always felt people should have a warm home, right? And so I would go and I'd volunteer to service people's furnaces, volunteer to help shore up windows for the winter, do roofs. I used to volunteer for that shit all the time when I lived in New Brunswick. I haven't done so much of it out here, but I have been able to do some work out here, which kind of pushed me into doing this, to where we're actually teaching, because I'm not out doing the work anymore physically. So religion is good works in the community, and Jesus always did good works in the community, even when he was a small boy. One of the works in his community of Nazareth was he organized all the children that were in and about his age range, appropriate age range. And he kind of created a boys club, actually, where they invented games, or came up with games that were educational, and also exercise their dexterity and stuff like that.
Sure.
And so he came up with games like that would improve the mind and body. And he was, popular. Holy shit! Everybody in Nazareth knew who Jesus was. They didn't know him as a son of man or anything like that, because Mary and Joseph were very careful to keep Gabriel's promise to themselves. The only people outside of their family that knew, actually nobody outside the family knew. Obviously, John's parents knew, because they shared Gabriel visit both of them, Mary and Simone, I think her name was. I forget, anyways. So they had a great conversation together before the kids were even born. And Joseph was always a little bit skeptic, but he was always kind of looking for signs in Jesus, of the promised child. And so Joseph never, he believed his wife, but he also kind of felt like she might have misunderstood the message a little bit, because he couldn't wrap his mind around the thought that, your son is basically God in the flesh. So that just wasn't. And Joseph constantly entertained the idea that Jesus was probably the Messiah. So that was always something. But Joseph was a deeply, I guess, religious man, traditionalist man, very Hebrew, very Jewish. I guess if he knew the Hebrew law, and he practiced it and did it happily. He was a very outstanding pillar in his community. So even though they were not a rich family, that didn't take away from their status in the community. They were still very well liked. Neighbors came home and visited all the time. Jesus was visiting his friends all the time. They were, quite active in the community. So when Joseph died, he was greatly missed in the community, not only by his family, but by the community in general, because he was so active. And so Jesus had games, created a little club, and this all, he did all of this right up until the age of 15, when he traveled to Jerusalem for his, bar mitzvah, I guess is what the modern term is now. But anyways, it was his dedication to the temple, as all firstborn children in the Hebrew religion at that time were obligated to do. So he didn't, he had friends with him when they went up there. And he spent some time in the caravan with his friends. It wasn't until after the ceremony in Jerusalem that he kind of backed off of things for various reasons. Some of it was had a little bit to do with his parents, because his parents were I don't know, they were getting a little embarrassed by his outspokenness.
Yeah, I think it said something about the age of 13 or whatever. He went and had some discussions with the elders in the temple or something.
That was during his bar mitzvah, his transition to manhood.
Yeah.
And what
it was probably, I don't know if it was the first time he'd been to Jerusalem, but one of the first times he'd been, in there for such an important purpose, and he was kind of.
I think that was the first time.
He got into it with the
And yeah, he did get into it with them, and they were the elders in the church, priests, whatever you want to call them, Sadducees. They were quite impressed.
Yes.
There was some wise men that were there listening to him. They were well cold in their graves by the time Jesus started his ministry, and it was like Jesus purposely timed everything that way so that most of the people that knew him in his youth would not remember him, or recognize him in his manhood, or they had already passed away. Like his teacher that he grew up with, the old Khazar that taught in the synagogue in Nazareth. If that guy was still alive when Jesus had started his ministry, man, he would have died on any rock for him. Any rock, because he taught Jesus from a young age. And I think they start in the temple at 5 years old. Yeah. Firstborn kid is obligated to go to the temple in the Hebrew religion. Okay, the next kids, if you can afford it, yeah. But the first one had to go because your firstborn was dedicated to God, basically. The old Abrahamic religion, of course. And so, anyways, the Kazan, he taught Jesus, and he was always amazed at Jesus's thoughtfulness. And of course, they called him Oshawa then. That was his childhood name, Oshawa, or Joshua, however way you want to pronounce it. They was super impressed, so impressed that Jesus would earn an extra month off in the summertime. Kids generally got a month off during the summer, but he earned an extra month. And that's how he ended up in Galilee a lot, and growing up around fishing. So he was kind of splitting his time between the carpenter shop in Nazareth and the fishing and fishing with his uncle in Galilee. So, or not Galilee, but the other, it starts with a B.
Was it Bethsaida?
Bethsaida, yes, Bethsaida. And and that's also how he ended up getting to know the Zebedees. Because the Zebedees, they were a pillar in the community. They built the damn boats that the fishermen were using, so all the fishermen knew them. And so through Jesus, through his uncle, ended up meeting the Zebedees, who happened to have children that were around the same age as Jesus. So they ended up becoming playmates. That's what I mean when like half of the disciples knew Jesus,
Right.
and at least two of them he grew up with, and so he grew up with them. But he didn't meet them until like later on. Like I think he was in his like early teens, or around maybe 9, 10ish.
Yeah.
When he started going to his uncle's for his summer vacation. So that was good, and gave Joseph and Mary a chance to make more babies, which they did. They had up to 8 kids. Yeah. One of them died, I think. And well, one of them did die, but I'm not sure if there 2 did. And Ruth was the last one, and she was born after Joseph's death. And this is where the stories or the legends come in, where Jesus was a father. Technically, he was a father, but biologically, he had no children.
Right.
But he was a father. He was a father to his brothers and sisters. They used to call him their father-brother. When James stood up in the synagogue, and whenever he addressed Jesus, he always addressed him as his father-brother. I mean, that's interesting. And James had to do that because there were people that were trying to pull Jesus into a political situation. And it was, again, not because of his ministry, because he wasn't ministering at this time. This was way before his ministry. He was in his late teens, I think it was. And so there were Jews that were getting pissed off with the Roman government, and they wanted to start a revolution.
The Zealots or something.
Yeah, the Zealots. And so they wanted to start a revolution. And so Jesus, they knew Jesus was like, he was basically the unofficial leader of the community. Like, nobody did shit in Nazareth without coming talking to Jesus first. Unofficially, of course. But everybody, always sought his advice because they watched him raise his brothers and sisters from the age of 15 when Joseph died. And you wonder why Joseph is not mentioned in the New Testament, because he was already cold in the ground by the time most of the disciples met Jesus. So they never got to meet his father, but they did meet his mother because Mary was still there. But it's interesting that there is nowhere in the New Testament that mentions that Mary is a widow. Because if it did, you'd begin to understand very quickly why Jesus had such compassion for widows. I mean, to the point to where he would get really upset if you treated a widow bad. And so, they came to him because he was that guy in the community, and all the men his age respected him, and a lot of the older men respected him. And because of his work, for one thing, he was a carpenter, and plus he did repairs at the repair shop. So I don't know about you, but I mean, think about your local gas station that has the repair garage attached. I mean, it's the hangout place. Every Friday, you're going to see half a dozen guys standing by the garage door in the summertime, all with a can of beer in their hand. Why cans? Because nobody wants broken glass in their garage. So that was the repair shop. It was basically a community hangout too. Kids used to play outside his repair shop all the time. He used to make like little toys for the kids. He loved making toys for the kids, and they called him Uncle Oshawa. They loved him, and so if the kids were there, that means the parents were close by. So he was basically kids were being dropped off at his repair shop because he had a little play area for the kids out back, and he would stop. Like his afternoon break would be spent telling the kids stories, and he loved doing that. He raised his brothers and sisters, and his little sister Ruth. I mean, she was born after Joseph died. Mary was pregnant, about 6-7 months pregnant when Joseph died. And so, and she had to make that trip. to go and claim the body. That would really suck. And so that was his little sister, and she called him father because that's all she knew who was father to her. So again, there's your legend. And so they all respected him, and so they were trying to talk him into doing this, leading his local chapter for the rebellion. I don't know, I guess it may be like a terrorist cell, maybe.
Something like that, yeah.
And but
and he basically said, "That's not my job. The kingdom to come is not of this world." Is that when he started saying that, or not? I'm making up. What did he? I mean, he turned him down. Obviously. Did he give an explanation at that time? He just said no. Or?
Not to the crowd in general, but to people, to the people that were close. Mm-hmm. He basically said that he was waiting on his father's works.
Yes.
And so that is what he used to say in the early days. Yeah, I'm waiting on my father. I'm waiting on my father. That was always his excuse. But this time it wasn't cutting it for them, because they were coming at him. Well, this could be, what your father wants you to do. They were coming at him at some really fucked up angles, eh? I mean, so he was like, they were putting him in a corner basically. And if he outright said no, then everybody would be upset with him. So, I mean, and he didn't want to just say no. So basically, and this is where the old Kaz, his old teacher, he knew that Jesus was not going to be no military commander. He knew Jesus was a child of promise, but he seen him as more like a rabbi or a great teacher somehow. And, and he encouraged Jesus to go to Jerusalem. But after Joseph died, all those plans went to shit, which is kind of the reason why Joseph had to die. It's kind of sad, but, there was a lot. The Rancher book tells us that there were many reasons why Joseph's life had to be cut short. Many, many reasons, many good reasons. So, yeah, plans within plans. So... anyways, and you got to also remember, as you might think that's horrific that they actually, look at planning Joseph's death. You got to remember, from their point of view on the other side, this flesh is nothing to them. They look at the soul and its potential for survival. So they would never have cut Joseph's life short unless his soul had a great potential for survival.
Yes.
So they knew his soul had potential for survival. They seen that. They understood that. So, I mean, cutting his life short, from their point of view, they were saving it. Seriously. And so Joseph, of course he had a soul survival. Yes, of course he did. And so, or else they would never have cut his life short. So... simple as that. And anyways, what ended up happening is the old Kazan went to James, and he did this without Jesus knowing. And him and James crafted a speech together. And James stood up in front of the synagogue. And he explained why it would not be good for Jesus to leave him. And it was actually quite brilliant because basically James was like, this is our father, essentially our father. If you take him away from us, then we will end up suffering. But if you wait just a few more years, then instead of having just one son of Joseph to help in your struggle, you will have 3 sons of Joseph, all raised by our brother, and so that was enough to satiate the crowd and get them to back off, so that they did not bother Jesus about doing this thing anymore. So that's how he got out of that. It's kind of, kind of the same thing that how he got out of marriage too. Yes, Jesus almost got married, and or at least it was Chicky wasn't taking no for an answer. Let's put it that way. She was the daughter of a wealthy merchant, so she had she had pull. Let's put it that way. And she was also friends with one of Joshua's sisters. So, she told Jesus' sister that she really liked her brother, and so that started the ball rolling. And so the women kind of conspired to play matchmaker and to set this up, and Mary was involved too. At about this point in life had been like so up and down, so hectic, and Mary had mostly forgotten about Gabriel's visit. So it wasn't, I mean, she didn't forget it, but it wasn't something that she was focusing on. They were basically in survival mode, every day, waking up, cows to milk, chickens to feed, eggs to collect. They were just getting by. And so kind of would be nice to marry into a rich family, right? You get to get taken care of. And but at the same time, Mary knew that she would be losing her son, and she wasn't prepared for that either. And so in the end, Jesus ended up taking this young woman off to the side and had a conversation with her in her father's house, and basically explained, and I'll tell you, at first he was like, he's like, maybe my mother told you this, or said, oh, I know my mother told you this. Yes, because this is at the time that it all kind of came back to Mary, that Jesus was a son of promise. So he says, I know my mother told you that I am a son of promise. And of course she agreed, yes, she did. And Jesus says, so then you understand that I cannot be tied down with marriage and, and the responsibilities that go with it. Well, fuck me. Chicky, she had just the perfect answer. If you are a son of promise, then you will need someone beside you to support you and to carry you through. I was like, man, that's smart. That was smart. But Jesus. But then Jesus came at it from another angle. He was like, well, I can't leave my family. My mother's a widow. I still have small children at home that I'm still raising. And she almost came to the point where, she'd be like, well, we'll raise them together. I mean, it was quite the conversation, but eventually Jesus had to break her heart as much as he didn't want to. But that didn't deter her. No, she did leave Nazareth. Because she was embarrassed, because she was quite open about her intentions to marry Oshawa. And so she did move, and but she didn't stop keeping an eye on Jesus, and so she always kept track of his whereabouts. She did lose track of him for I think the 2.5 years that he traveled, but she was one of the first people to know that he was back. She and so she knew when he came back and was working at the Zebedee's boathouse, and so she always kept an eye on him from a distance, and she was there during the crucifixion. She was there through most of the major events. She was part of the 5,000 that he fed. Yeah, so through a lot of the major events, she was there. And because her family was quite wealthy, she gave a lot of money to the ministry. Like I think she pretty much even after she ended up pretty much bankrupting herself, because even after Jesus died, she did not stop supporting the apostles. So she kept supporting them all along. And she was the main reason why the apostles even had a roof over their head and food in their belly. So, yeah, she took care of them. And yeah, her whole life was dedicated to getting Jesus's message out, especially after he died. Like, her story is just, I mean, I doubt if it's even written down anywhere. So, get back on track with religion. So, the point of all of that preamble was to really show that Jesus was practicing his religion. He was living his religion, and he started at an early age. And that was, he was in the community, service in the community all the time.
And it makes sense, because that's, what else, where else are you going to first direct your attention? You can't, what was the story about, I think it's Eastern person. He says, well, I want to change the world. Well, okay, maybe the world's a big change. I want to change my kingdom. Well, that's a little big. Maybe I'll start smaller. I want to change my my city. Well, that's a bunch of stuff going on. There's maybe a few things I can do, but well, let's see. How can I? Well, I've got my family. Maybe I can help them out with stuff. And then finally, he realizes the one person I can change is the one in the mirror, me. So, and then you start out. It's like start small and then watch where it goes.
Yeah. Changing the world first starts by taking a good long look in the mirror.
Right.
That's where you start changing the world. Because even though we are all separate, we are all still one. I mean, we talked about this with prayer. And, and there's still more detail you can get into on that too. But it's next level stuff. I mean, it gets into morphogenic fields, a resonance field, the egg project. There's so much that science actually shows us about prayer. But you've got to have a spiritual mind in order to start seeing it, or dare I say, a religious mind, before you can start seeing it. Otherwise, it's just an anomaly and a curiosity. Like the magic of water. Yoshi Omo's research in Japan back in the mid-90s. How water can change its crystalline structure depending on the emotion that is directed at it. So, it's a curiosity, it's an anomaly. Nobody's bothered to do a deep dive into that. So, yeah. Let me read something right from the Urantia book for you. And this is what the Urantia book has to say about religion. Put on my reading voice this time, maybe. True religion is not a system of philosophic belief which can be reasoned out and substantiated by natural proofs. Neither is it a fantastic and mystic experience of indecipherable feelings of ecstasy which can be enjoyed only by the romantic devotees of mysticism. Religion is not the product of reason, but viewed from within, it is altogether reasonable. That kind of makes me chuckle. Religion is not derived from the logic of human philosophy, but as a mortal experience, it is altogether logical. Religion is the experiencing of divinity in the consciousness of a moral being of evolutionary origin. It represents true experience with eternal realities in time, the realization of spiritual satisfactions while yet in the flesh. So yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. So, and I came to this conclusion actually on my own. I didn't, the book didn't actually tell me this, but when I read it in the book, I just kind of smiled. You can only go so far improving God, and then the rest has to be taken on faith.
Yeah.
And then you have to, because eventually, no matter how much knowledge you accumulate, how much you logic things down, how much math you know, science you know, sooner or later you're going to get to that wall,
yeah,
or to that cliff, and you're going to have to take that leap of faith, because even though you can prove, like, technically I can prove God using science, but it's so easy to take a left turn, and mankind has in its philosophy when they're in their search for God. Did you know, and I'm sure some people do, that that people believe that the universe is controlled by an AI, some kind of artificial intelligence, some kind of big computer out there, like the Matrix and shit like that. People believe that shit. And it's just like, wow. But you see, you can, using science and logic from a totally material standpoint, that is where you're going to get to. That is exactly where you land. And this is what I mean by, the next step, you just have to take the faith. So yeah, you can get to the point to where, the whole universe is a matrix ran by an AI. Okay, there is solid evidence that actually takes us in that direction. And you can sit there on that preface, and you could be quite comfortable. But unless you have a spiritual mind or a longing for spiritual things, you will stay there on that preface.
Yeah, I've seen in my interactions on, mostly on some of these theist groups on Facebook, they talk about that a bit, and the question seems to be what's the nature of the AI? Is it benevolent? That you can't, you can prove the existence of it with science, but you can't determine its nature with science.
No, you can't.
Externally, you can't.
And from everything that you see, like if we take the AI philosophy a little bit, or idea a little bit further, the AI would neither be benevolent nor malevolent.
Right.
Every decision would be predicated on what came before. And the thing is that is actually totally logical, because that too is part of the nature of God, part of the nature of the divine. That every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So everything that happens in the universe, we said this before, right? There is no end to the universe, because every time something novel comes up, then that novel idea has to be explored from every angle. God can't help himself. It's just like, so anytime something comes up, it's just like, well, there's a million other things out, a million other questions just came up.
I had this wacky idea, which is probably actually so. The universe is God's laboratory.
Essentially. And I was showing how time, like when it comes to like these new novel things happening, and then what happens to time. And why does God know what's going to happen at the other end? Well, because every time something novel comes up, then I watch this whole wave of light shoot off into the future, going down through this huge, huge pipe or tunnel of time. And all you see around the edges was just information, just bits of information. That's all I can describe it. It's like a
huge fiber optic cable.
Yeah, and it's just like all these bits are just everywhere.
Doing enough.
And there's only one, and this is the part that fascinates the shit out of me, is that God, like, while we are in this local universe, we have several timelines that we look at. I've seen them. But when God looks out in time, it's just one big pipe to him. It's just, and all the other timelines are all swirled in around it. All that information is all swirled and intertangled around it, kind of like going through the wormhole of the Doctor Who episode. And and so whenever something novel comes in, then that novel, all the possibilities that are associated with that novel thing, all the potentials, God explores them all. And that changes the whole tunnel. And then now the end of creation just got put off by one more number. So he just keeps adding one to infinity. That's all God ends up doing. Every time something new happens, one gets added to infinity. And so infinity is just always, it's always going to be infinite, no matter what. The only way that it could stop being infinite is if God made the universe static. But we know what happens when things are static, when there is no dynamic. Things wither and die in time and space. So this is why everything has to be dynamic, has to be constantly in motion all the time, or things will die. God is not static. Paradise is static, but God is not.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I'm not sure if it's exactly a parallel analogy, but if you remember when computers used to have mechanical hard drives and you would defrag them and so on, and if you left your computer connected to the internet or had an app running or something while it was defragging, you could watch it would defrag, and then I guess something would change a little bit and then it would have to go back through, and then it would get pretty quickly back to where, but it would have to kind of
it'd have to go back through.
You'd have to revisit, or it'd have to go and look at that thing that had changed and deal with it. So
yeah, and so imagine. So I mean, this big pipe of time is just constantly glowing all the time, because novel things are coming up all the time. 7 grand universes. So you got shit happening in Paradise. You got shit happening in Havana, where there's 1 billion planets, and some of them aren't even settled yet. They're still they're still.
Yeah, I think I was listening to that on the way up. It's like 1% of
those billion.
I don't know if it's 1% of the planets or 1% of the. It's something like 1% of each planet or 1% of all of them or whatever. But yeah, there's basically nobody there yet.
Yeah. So I mean, even Havana is still expanding. But it's not expanding in time and space. It's evolving. Yes, it's a better word. Yes, and so you have Havana evolving. You've got the 7 grand universes evolving, and you have the local universes evolving and expanding at the same time. So you got all of this shit going on all at once. Do you think nothing new is happening there? There's always going to be something new, or in the very least, a new way of doing something old.
Yeah.
I mean, growing up on the farm, you see tons of that. I mean, think about plowing soil. Man has been plowing soil for like 500,000 years. But do we do it the way our ancestors do it? Not even close. So even though plowing is like the oldest agricultural tool in the world, the simple plow, where it started and where it is now is light years from each other. Because, I mean, started out with a bone plow, a horn, off of a ram or some damn thing. Somebody shaped it so that they could break their soil. Then it evolved to in some places it's developed as wood with a steel edging on it to keep the wood from wearing down too quick. In other places, they would find a flat rock and tie it to a stick, and they would do it that way. But no, the plow is many different. It's like there's like 1,000 clever creations for the plow. I mean, I love seeing plows, the old ancient plows in museums.
Yeah.
It just blows my mind. And I just look at it and I'm just like, they broke soil with that. So, and now to where we are today, where we lock this great big chunk of metal onto this great big tractor, and then we just sink that sucker and we're going down 18 inches sometimes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and just turn the soil. And just, and just like, there you go. That's plowing. Oh yeah, our ancestors would just be awed by such a feat of earth moving. Because they sure as hell didn't see anything like that. So yeah, there's always going to be something new. Now, I do get a few other things. And this is the other, yes, and this is kind of what got me away from the Wiccans in a way. It's because their idea is that it's all about your feelings and emotions. But I was like, well, what about the thoughts that are attached to those feelings and emotions? That has always been my thing, and and sometimes people put themselves, like some of these people that put themselves in ecstasy in like evil and sinful ways. I mean, some of them would, find ecstasy cutting themselves. Well, how is that spiritual in any way? You know what I mean? So, what the Urantia book says is, it is not your thoughts, not your feelings that lead you Godward. And I kind of recognize that amongst the Wiccans. I was like, yeah, you guys you got some spiritual ideas, you've got some good philosophy, but you're not evolving, is what I guess that's probably what I looked for in a lot of groups when that I ended up associating with. Is I would end up being in the group for like maybe 6-8 months. And I'd be like watching people, and I'd be looking at the situation. And what I've always noticed among these groups, there is no evolution of thought or spirituality. They want to read old books. They want to practice old ways. And it's just like, history is meant for us to learn from, not to repeat.
Right.
So, I mean, yeah, I've looked at all these old texts, and I use some of those techniques even when I'm like worshiping the Father, or even when I'm talking with our Creator brother. I'm constantly our Creator Father brother. How many fucking planets can say that, people? That the Creator of the universe is our Father and our brother. How messed up is that? We are the envy of this universe, because no other planet can say that. And on top of that, he's also the prince of our world.
That's right. Not only is the sovereign of the universe, but he's
he's our planetary prince.
Planetary prince.
Yeah, so he's sovereign of the universe with all of the titles that go with that.
Yes.
And somewhere's in that title, that long title, there's planetary prince of Urantia.
Yeah.
Right in there, right next to, right up there, right next to son of the Eternal Father.
Right.
I mean, holy shit. I mean, people don't even know, don't understand. Like, you got to understand, titles at that level of universal existence have meaning, have deep philosophical meanings, because when you go through Michael's titles, it tells you a couple of stories. It tells you his experience, the level of his knowledge and the level of his wisdom. It's like you go down through all of Michael's titles, and it tells you everything you need to know about him. And if you don't take 2 steps backwards and just fucking let your fucking jaw drop for a second, then you've gotten lost in misunderstanding, because it just, I think the Urantia book reads off some of his titles, and I was blown away. First time I read that list, I was like, wow, this guy has done it all. And I was like, that's my hero. A guy who's done it all, just like my dad, did it all. Like, started out, owned his own business, worked in the trades, became an engineer, then became a litigator. He went from line cook to owning a restaurant to running a service garage. I don't know how he made that leap. I really don't. Service garage, painting cars, and then electrician. He wrote the test, became an electrician. I think by the time he was in his mid to late 20s. Electrician. And then he was like, what the hell, might as well do plumbing. So he did plumbing. And then I think by the time he was 30, he was like, what the hell, I might as well do engineering. So he did engineering. And then after the engineering thing, he decided, what the hell, I'm going to be a litigator. So he studied law, specifically labor law, because he wanted to protect workers. Yeah. That was what his passion was. Good. And never lost a case. Oh yeah, people were terrified when they seen his name on the docket. They were like, "Oh dear God, it's Bud Rideout. Oh my God, can we just not do this today?" Oh yeah, they would just be like, they would want to try to meet him in the back room before they got in front of the judge, because they knew once he got in front of the judge, Father had a way of talking and just putting the law right out there. There's this scene in one movie, and I don't remember the movie right now, but it's this lawyer, like your dad. He's got kind of a reputation, and the opposing counsel, before the case actually starts, they're sitting and he's writing these messages or numbers or whatever. And anyway, long story short, they ended up settling the case before it actually before the judge actually started the case. So. Yeah. Because settled it out of court, I guess. So. Father would break it right down logically for the judge. I mean, he would actually. Father used to say, he's like, when you walk into court, he always felt like he should do the judge's job for him. So basically, Father would write what he thought a judge should write when it came to the opinion of the law. And he could get into the judges' heads, and he could write that all out, and the judges would read it, and they would just be like, it all makes sense. So he always talked to the judges and not at the prosecutor. Yeah. Or, because he was usually on the defendant side. Yeah. And so, it was amazing. It was quite the thing to watch sometimes in court. I got to see him a few times in action. Still blows my mind to this day. So, where were we? Oh yeah, we're still dealing with religion. Yeah, the Wiccans. And then let's see what else I put in here. Because I'm just going to throw something in, because what you've been talking about, I guess, I don't know if it's kind of rare maybe, but I've got this kind of evaluation diagnostic system that runs in the background all the time, and it just analyzes every thought and every feeling, especially to do with this sort of stuff, like the esoteric and the nature of God and the nature of relations with God and stuff, and it just is unceasing. It's like, okay, what is this? Yes, this feels good, but is it good? Is this a good way to worship the Father, or something else a little better, etc., etc.? Is this valuable? And it just keeps running and giving me feedback on what
what its findings are and stuff.
And that is exactly correct. Remember what I said about Stephen Crowder last time? It's like he doesn't go to the Bible. He described his religion as, yeah, he's Christian, and he's proud of his Christianity, but he doesn't go to the Bible to, like, to double check everything. He has the same thing that you just described. He's got a diagnostic program going on in the background all the time, and he compares it to Jesus's teachings. He knows what Jesus taught, brotherhood and community, and whenever something comes up against that, and it's like, no. It's like, why does Crowder hate Antifa? Because it destroys the community.
Yes.
And it divides people. That isn't what Jesus taught. That's out the door. Same thing with other organizations. Three initial organizations. All kinds of, same thing. His attitude is that if it doesn't mash up with the teachings of Jesus, which is, community, togetherness, faith in God, and everything like that, off the table. I mean, he considers Ben Shapiro to be one of his best friends, even though they're like oil and water. I mean, Shapiro, you show any more patch of skin than your hands are ahead, Ben Shapiro gets very uncomfortable very fast. Yeah. He's like, he's Jewish, but they consider each other like good friends, and not because they believe the same thing, but it's because they do the same thing. They have this background diagnostic all the time going on that, and from Ben Shapiro's point of view, he's looking at his Orthodox Jewish religion. From Crowder's point of view, he's looking at his Christian background.
And is it any wonder that I think there's probably a ton more study of the United States Constitution now? The constitutionalists are. That's, I guess, we'll just get your opinion on that briefly. That's something to compare. Look at, like, especially in the United States, does the Constitution allow X, or does X fit with the Constitution? Well, maybe we should double check that before we
yes, yeah,
before we go ahead and do something or prohibit something or something like that.
Yeah, and it's supposed to be the same way in Canada, but it's it's supposed to be our Bill of Rights, but our Bill of Rights is bullshit. I mean, really, it doesn't seem to work, anyways. The Americans have fared much better with their Constitution.
I think so.
I think so too, and I think that the world needs to adopt a Constitution similar to the American one.
That's what I've been thinking.
Yeah, I mean, very similar to the American one, and I think that it should be written in quantum syntax grammar, just so that there is no confusion. And that will start the ball rolling towards evolving our language to be more precise.
Yes.
And that would be something wonderful. And then the English language would be counted right up there with, like, Hebrew and Sumerian languages, where, they are very precise languages. They just don't mean anything to us today, because we don't understand it, and the reference points are all over the place. They're cultural references.
Yeah.
Quantum syntax language will use the elemental chart as a reference, and so that there's no confusion. And the elemental charts offer it all. I mean, you got numbers, you got weights. These things don't change ever, and so you can just compare it all to that. Anyways, that's another rabbit hole. So back to religion. Religion is basically is, I like this. The sense of evolutionary duty and the obligations consequent upon the illumination of revelation makes such a profound impression upon man's moral nature that he finally reaches the position of mind and that attitude of soul where he concludes that he has no right not to believe in God. And that is like, and let's go back to the man on the on the edge of the cliff. Okay. The man has proven that the universe is ran by an AI, but he can't take the extra step to that this being is more than an AI, but a creator and a father to the universe, a father figure. And that is where you just got to just take your leap of faith and see what happens when you step off the cliff. And when you step off the cliff, the Father will catch you.
And I just had a thought for how, might give them a little help. If we have personality and self-awareness and creativity,
mm-hmm.
How could the thing that created us not have it 10 million times more?
That's the other thing that always bothered me too. It's like, how can something without a spiritual or moral center create beings that do have a spiritual and moral craving?
Yes.
It's like, and so that's where you just got to just decide that, the Father is there and you trust that his nature is benevolent and, and that he always is wanting the best for us. And what we think is the best is...
It's not always, no.
No, we're children, essentially. And, even so, think about raising about children. It's like a children wants ice cream every day, but a good parent wouldn't give the child ice cream every day because he knows that the ice cream will, one scoop, isn't going to make you sick. 6 scoops probably will. And so, that's, God knows this. And so you might be like, oh, I want this and I want that. I want my car. I want my house. I want my, rich family, blah, 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 blah. The Father knows that ain't going to do you any good spiritually. So why should you bother having it? And, and so if you have a inkling to search for the Father and that is where your mind is, I probably wouldn't be anticipating mansions in your future. The Father doesn't work like that. I find that I've watched people in life a lot, and and I've often chased success. I've owned businesses, failures financially and shit like that. And I've watched the people that did succeed, and I always tried to copy them, and because I wanted what they had, right? And it always got uncomfortable. It always did, because I felt like I was leaving something behind. And I did play that game for a while. I really, and I had money, had boat, had the 4x4s, had the house, I had it all. It was fucking awesome. But I kept on thinking to myself, it's like, this just doesn't feel right. I mean, I was not paying attention to things anymore, the things that I was supposed to be paying attention to spiritually. And so all of that stuff is gone now. And, through circumstances that ended up happening, and the Father ended up, and the thing is, here's the best part. When I think back to that time, I started losing everything when I started thinking that there was something missing spiritually in my life. And that's when things started getting cleared away from me. Not because I wanted them to, but because the Father was like, oh, You're still searching for me? You still have questions? Well, let me help you out here. Let's get rid of the four-wheel drive. Okay, let's get rid of the boat. Let's get rid of the house. There, now you have nothing else. Now you have a clean plate. What are you going to do with that clean plate? I figured, at that time in my life, I figured, I don't owe anybody any more money. Bankruptcy took care of that. And, basically I was free of all my obligations, except for my family obligations, which I ended up making arrangements for. And I went and I did shit, traveled, learned things. And I just ended up in places where I was always learning something. And did that for quite a while. I didn't actually come out of that until I was like in my mid-30s. Yeah. And then finally settled down, and then crowds started gathering around me. So I ended up having fun with that and exploring that. But this is what the Father does. And I think we might be at a place now where it might be safe for me to have some wealth, at least to where I'm like almost half comfortable, and be able to keep my eye on the Father and be able to do His work and carry on.
Yeah. I'm just going to interject there. What was interesting for me was I got to see my parents came from two rather different backgrounds. My father was the son of a business owners in Wisconsin, and my mother was the only child of farmers in Oklahoma. So I got to see the family that had lots. My father's family, and then my mother's family, who had they had enough. Absolutely, don't get me wrong. They weren't extravagant by any means.
Modest,
right? Yes. And then add to that. Well, I'm extremely fortunate to have my parents were very good. They raised me right, I'm going to say, and then I also had this diagnostic program that I told you about a little while ago, and it's like it sort of always helped me look for go inner and upper and things like that. So I guess I learned at an early age that money doesn't bring happiness. So and I still kind of wanted. Let's see what in university I started with a '76 Dodge pickup. I went there, and then I thought, well, wouldn't it be cool if I had some kind of a nicer thing? So a friend of ours had, if you know what a Cadillac Seville was, like the 1984 that looks like a Rolls Royce. She had this thing that they had, and she gave it to me, and then I had to rebuild it. But I drove this flagship Cadillac in university, and it was like awesome. And then I sold it later because I didn't need it anymore. But I focused on my grandfather's '77 Buick, so like an electric two-door thing. It was so like, okay, I have this car and I have this, but you know what? The Buick's in better shape. It's a family heirloom. I'm going to keep that. Sell the Cadillac. I think I sold it to a neighbor who needed a car for something, for a few $100s or whatever.
There was more appreciation of the stuff that you did have.
Yes. When I pared it down because I had a ton of stuff, and I'm like, you know what? I never, and then we were starting to go back and forth to Canada and get the farm going again. So all this stuff sat in Oklahoma, and I didn't use it for anything because I had the car in university. I drive around. I took that thing everywhere. But once I got back, I had the Buick. I didn't need 3 cars. So I sold the Cadillac. I sold the previous car that they had, I think a '69 Chevy Bel Air. I sold those 2. I kept the Buick. And yeah, I was happier with less stuff. So,
Yeah. Now, I ran into that when I had my house on the lake. And just when I decided that I was going to go and work in the mines to make make some good money for like a year, maybe a year and a half. man, the logistics I had to go through to seal up my house before I could leave. I mean, I had to put boards on all the windows because, you know, little fuckers, right? Just walking down along the lake, throw rocks, right? So I had to, so everything had to be boarded up. And then I had to make sure that there was going to be somebody there on a regular basis. So I ended up giving a key to my niece. So her and her boyfriend ended up using my house while I was away. Also, my brother had to come down and make sure that the driveway was clear and everything like that. It was like a lot of BS. And if I didn't have family nearby, because we all lived within like a kilometer of each other, if I didn't have family nearby, I would have been shit out of luck for trying to just leave a place for a year and then expect to come back to a intact house. It probably wouldn't have happened. But as it was, I drove across Canada and landed in home in New Brunswick at my brother's place. Shit, I think it might have been like 10:30 at night. And I was just like, I just pushed the last little bit and just got through New Brunswick. And then got there. And all he had to do was just hand me the keys to my house. That's all he did. That's why I had to stop at my brother's first. Mm-hmm. Handed me the keys to my house. He says, I think I stayed there till about maybe 11:30, talking with him after that drive. And then went to my house, walked in, boom, bed was made, everything was good. Electricity was still on because my niece and nephew were using everything. And they were using the guest room for themselves. Well, actually, I found it later. They basically camped out in the living room most of the time. And so, yeah, I just had to just go, unlock my bedroom door, and fucking boom, laid down in my bed after like 5 days of driving across Canada. Yes. And boom, done. And then, yeah, religion, coming back around again. The assurance of religion transcends the reason of the mind, even the logic of philosophy. Religion is faith, trust, and assurance. Faith, trust, and assurance. That's what religion is. And that is what we need to, and so, I guess in a nutshell, you want your religion to be fruitful in the community. Again, another little thing from Jesus. You will know them by their fruits, by their works, and so that's how he would judge a religion. That's exactly how Jesus would judge a religion. What are its spiritual fruits? Right. Yes. What are the spiritual works that you are doing? I remember when he was ministering, ministering the kingdom to the people, the Women's Corps, their works involved helping the sick. Mm-hmm. and the people in need. That is what the women did a lot of. Because in those days they weren't allowed to teach, but they could certainly help the elderly and help the sick and the poor, and they did well doing that, and basically created a whole community. And the men, their work was going out and ministering and preaching, and they did that. And when Jesus taught his disciples, which is separate from the apostles. Mm-hmm. So there was the apostles, the 12 apostles, the ambassadors for the kingdom, but then there were hundreds of disciples too. And when Jesus taught them, he taught them about working in the community. And, because they weren't, they would minister his word, but it was their works that set them apart from other religions, because they actually went out in the community and they did work, and people were happy to do it. They were overjoyed to do it, and it's amazing that the Jews, the religious Jews, who were supposed to be the spiritual light of the world, ended up stifling all that community work as much as they could.
They became committed to an existing, basically corruption happened and stuff. So that.
You know what just entered my mind? Wow. The comparison between the left and the Sadducees and the Jews. Because right now, that's exactly where we are at in history. Think about the left from in the 60s. Joe Rogan actually said this, but I mean, it's kind of, I agree with him. Back in the 60s, your leftist hippie was all about, the environment, and, wanting to help. And they were actually all about community. Remember that? They were actually a positive force in a otherwise hard right, society. Because back then it was the right that was trying to censor radio and just, you have to read the Bible or you're just not a good person type thing. That is what the right was all about back then. But now, everything is all set on its head.
It is, absolutely.
And now we have the left calling for censorship, calling for, political correctness in everything that we do. It's just basically, it's the exact opposite of what it started out as, which is kind of how the Sadducees ended up where they were. They were supposed to be the teachers of light. And then somewhere along the line, their position became more important to them than their teaching.
Yes.
And that is exactly what has happened to the left. Being right has become more important to them than actually coming up with viable solutions. And the left used to be good at coming up with solutions. And now everybody's leaning right. And the right is very different from what it was back in the 60s. In fact, I look at the right and I see it almost as an amalgamation of what it was.
The left and the center from the 60s.
Yeah.
It is really.
Because, I mean, think about what's going on now, okay? Back in the 60s, if you were right, that meant that you were deeply religious in your church and, and community. And the thing is that you come up now and that is actually still there, but it's a more diverse opinion of what religion actually is.
Yes.
Because back in the 60s, the only thing that the right considered religious was anything that came out of the Western English Bible.
Christian church, and then the Jewish synagogues, I guess, in the like in America.
Yeah. So, and now it's like, just be a good person and believe in your Creator. Yeah. That's basically what it's come down to. And when you look at the people that are joining the right, and like even from the LGBT community. Oh, did I miss a letter? Probably. Fuck. And it's like, yeah, I'm gay, I'm lesbian, I'm this, I'm that, but I do believe in a Creator, and I believe in right and wrong. And now they're starting to come around to where I believe in the American Constitution. I seen that on a clip, an LGBT person holding that rainbow flag, being like, no, 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 I support the Constitution. The Constitution protects me.
Yes.
All these other things that the left wants to put in place for scaffolding that is supposed to protect me, he said, is actually puts me in more danger. And he explained it out. And I agreed with him. He said, and the reason why, because, why it puts him in danger, his reasoning is because it singles him out of a crowd of people. He says, I'm now no longer part of the herd. He says, I'm singled out. He says, do you know what happens when you get parted from the herd? You become wolf food. So he said, no. He says, we are a community. We need to come back together under the Constitution. He said, the Constitution protects us all. He says, when it's enforced properly.
That's awesome. I've been wondering how long it would take
it's starting to
certain
happen.
People to realize that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's
I'm blown. and
that was a guy from Florida, by the way. Yes.
Nice. And I haven't. It's on my phone, so I can't read it to you now. But I'll tell you basically the gist, and I can maybe on another thing I can briefly read the text. In one of these, I went on. This is in the one of the theist atheist debate groups, I guess, on Facebook. And I gave kind of a little bit of a background about, because they do these intro things like I'm this, I believe this, etc. And I did one of these a few days ago, and the basis of the the basis of the conversation was that this guy who is I guess, an atheist agnostic, he questioned me some on kind of what, I basically said I'm a general spiritualist, and he said, well, what is a general spiritualist? And I had to think about it, and I explained what it was. I believe in beings, forces, and energies that modern science cannot necessarily detect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And he said, why do you believe in them? And I said, well, it seems that the universe isn't complete with just what we can see right now. There's something missing. And he said, okay, that's cool. I am. He said, so it's like being religious, but you don't have to commit. And I said, well, sort of, I guess. I never thought about it like that. And he said, okay, that's cool. I'm the opposite side of the coin. I see no reason to believe in gods or magic, but I am open. I still allow myself to question. And he said, and I said, okay, that's awesome. So we have all the, it's happening, folks. I mean, the just in the last, well, since I joined these things, almost a year ago by now, I guess. I'm seeing so much agreement between theists and atheists, and then there's they want some what do you say was a pagan, I guess. He said I'm an American pagan, ask me anything. So there was and somebody else, another admin, said, let's have a little more discussion from it's Christians versus atheists. That's getting old. Let's talk about some of the she talked about the Wiccans, and she talked about this and that, and I have now had the opportunity to say many times in many groups, it is who what we are, what we believe that is kind of more important, or how we conduct ourselves and interact with each other.
Yes.
That is more important than whether we strictly believe in a deity or not.
Yes.
And they've actually said on one of these things, somebody came and said, I am tired to death of the does God exist or not question. And I said, yeah, I left that behind a long time ago. Let's talk about how to interact with each other.
Mm. And you're right, it is coming back around to that, because I think that in the morphogenetic fields of the planet, I think that everybody is already comfortable with the idea of a deity or a creator. I think that is well established in our super consciousness. And so now we're on the cusp of a new evolution, because the Spirit of Truth has had its chance to work on this planet for 2,000 years.
Yes, it just so you know, when Jesus left, when he ascended, he then sent, I guess, the Spirit of truth to abide on this planet and to do its work, which briefly is what?
Basically to help humans intuitively to understand universal truths.
Okay.
And
And we have a comment. I'll get to that in just a second, but go ahead
and
finish that up.
And so those truths are in conjunction with working with the thought adjuster, basically put seeds in our super consciousness for the planet.
Okay.
And Jesus described the Spirit of Truth as being poured out onto the planet.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting analogy.
Morphogenic field is this, like you take a sphere, the confectioner takes this round candy, he pours the chocolate, it envelops the chocolate.
And yeah.
When you said that, I got the image of
so
a field around the planet.
Imagine the Spirit of Truth being poured out in the Middle East, in that area where Jesus did his core of his teaching and lived his life. So if that was the focal point of this pouring out of the Spirit of Truth, it would basically, like a confection chocolate, it would just pour over the whole planet. And it has basically already done that. So it took time for it to move around the whole planet. I'd say that it probably finished up its work about maybe 150 years ago, when by the time that it was well nigh established, these universal truths.
Yeah.
Because you just look at the literature of the late 19th, early 20th century, we were poised to, well, actually, I look at it as a bit of a dry run. Okay? There was a great awakening. There's been two great awakenings on this planet before this one. One, 1776, in and around that area, during the French Revolution, American Revolution, all like that, okay?
Yeah.
There was awakening, okay? The people's reaction to that awakening it did motivate people to wake up, but it motivated people out of their seats, but it happened in a very violent way.
Yes.
And so that was that great awakening. That was also a test. Let's see where these humans are. Boom, a kind of a beta test for the Great Awakening. And of course, what did we have? Well, we had guillotines in front of the castle in France. So that's, it's like, okay, these people wake up a little bit, they just start killing each other. Okay. It moved them towards democracy. Good thing. Not, but the way that they did it, whoo! Yeah. Okay.
So now we have the internet.
Now we have the internet.
We can. I'll have to show you the. I'm talking with one of these hardline atheists, and I've got him to the point where he's basically called me insane for believing there might be these supernatural beings, forces, etc., and supporting the U.S. Second Amendment, and also suggesting.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Suggesting that the Illuminati may be messing with our planet. So he says, see a doctor.
See a doctor.
And I'm just going to tell him, thank you for helping me with my Zen. I appreciate it. So So.
Yeah, and the thing is that and that I always laugh because my.
And the point, I'll just interrupt you for a second. The point that I'm trying to make is that now we, 150, 200 years ago, we killed people when
we disagreed.
Now we just stab their egos.
Yeah, now we just stab their egos.
I hurt his ego very much by explaining where I'm at and questioning something or other. He was saying he posted this article about what to do. This is in America. What to do if you see armed militia outside your polling place? And I just said, what's the intimidation here? I want clarification. He and others were basically intimidated by the Oath Keepers walking around carrying peacefully and legally and probably with very much training on how to safely handle these firearms, carrying their weapons around outside these polling places.
Oh my God! I mean, that is
and it
one.
triggers these people, and
Yeah.
I just played with it a little bit. I didn't want to hurt him, but I needed to ask kind of what I needed to play my side, because in a debate, I love Christopher Hitchens for a couple of reasons. He explained in a debate, and I think it's Christopher. If Crow and I are having a debate, I'm not trying to convince Crow of anything. Not really. If we have different points, I'm talking to you, and Crow is talking to everybody listening.
Yeah.
We're not really talking to each other. So I was talking to everybody else. I mean, to him somewhat, but to everybody else who would at some point read that.
Yeah, that's exactly
that
how I handle. Yeah,
conversation.
I handle Twitter the same way.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not talking to the person. I'm talking to everybody else that is reading this tweet. And so that's also what keeps me from, debasing myself as well.
And then I could see that I was, he was appearing at least to be very hurt and very triggered and whatever, but I didn't do it for that reason. I did it because I had to, basically.
And sometimes you got to give people a little stab. Go down through my Twitter feed sometime. Holy crap! I mean, I'll take you to task if you say anything stupid to me, and and I'll just come right out with the facts, or in the very least, something that you should be thinking about. And I've done that to people all the time. It's like, what? I ain't got proven this, but maybe this is an angle you should be looking at.
Yeah.
And here's the logic why you should. And, so it's like, it's even comes down to the whole God thing. And, it's like, okay, yeah, I mean, there's a reason why you should be searching for the Father. And part of it is because you're trying, and it should be because part of you is trying to find yourself at the same time.
So yeah, the answer to this question is yes. I'll just get a reply here.
It's like, if you are searching for the Father, you're actually searching for yourself. And when you are searching for yourself, you're actually searching for the Father. So no matter which direction you come at it from, you're going to end up at the end goal. And it's just a matter of, asking questions, proper questions. And why is not a question. I mean, yes, it is, but it's only appropriate in a few circumstances. Why does not specify anything. So when you ask questions, try to avoid just asking why. There's only been a few times that the Father has actually shown me anything because I've asked why. And the why usually has to be prefixated on something else.
Yeah. What is usually a better, or sometimes how.
Yeah, I mean, there's been lots of times that I'd be like, how is that happening? Or how does this work? Or how does that work? And I'll tell you, when you ask how things work, you get answers a lot faster, by the way, because knowing how things work is actually easier to answer than why things work. Because it's like, how does time work? I've been showing how time works. I've described a little bit of it earlier, and it's just like, that's neat is all I can say. And, and stuff like that. Whoa, heard a little snap from this heater. Why?
That's right, it's not overheating in there.
Yeah.
Probably be, I don't know.
I don't know.
Okay.
When you got like 13,000 BTUs blasting in the background, I tend to get a little nervous. Anything can happen. But yeah, just be, and that's where your religion comes in as well. It's like religion is also about searching. It's not about just doing your work. It's about asking questions, proper questions, and always searching. Um, the Indian boy that Jesus tutored, he wrote a whole dissertation on what he described as our religion, meaning him and Jesus, and what to him what it meant to him, and a lot of it was like exalting the Father and searching for meanings and ideals.
So yeah, just to reiterate what the religion of Jesus was, reminding about the fatherhood of God and the brotherhood of man, right? Because that's what the book says over and over again. It's so incredibly simple. It's I mean, it's yeah.
And Jesus took a very complex subject like religion, and he boiled it down to those simple concepts: fatherhood of God and the brotherhood of man, and where we end up going after that, and when you think about it, you start from just those two prefaces, you can actually create quite the community. And that is actually the basis for the Constitution of the U.S. is the fatherhood of God and the brotherhood of man, and they worked out a constitution from that simple framework, which is actually amazing when you really think about it.
Yeah, and it's interesting how secular friendly it actually is, because it doesn't just ram God down anybody's throat. I think it mentions something like in the preamble to the Constitution, it says something about we believe that all men are created equal and imbued by their Creator. It doesn't say God; it says Creator.
Yeah, I think they were careful to choose the word.
They made it. They had some vision when they wrote that thing.
Did they ever? I mean, I've read it. I didn't read the parts that pertain to government structure. I just read the part that pertained to the people's rights and what is expected, and I was impressed. And but then you read the Canadian Bill of Rights, and it's like a 12-year-old wrote it when you compare it to the U.S. Constitution. It's really messed up, and that it would end up being that different. And I personally, I'll tell you something. And this will probably, people are going to be like, no, that's fucked up. No, I think this is really something that's in the future, that's going to be coming. I seen in a vision an American flag, but it wasn't the same flag that we're looking at today. It was different. It had the stripes, and it still had the blue square up in the corner. It was what was in that blue square that blew my mind. And okay, so in the center of that square, that blue square, was a 49, maybe a 48-point star.
Okay.
I did ask why two are missing. Okay, and each one of those points represented the states, North American states. Okay, so how many ever states are on the North American continent? That's what it counted. Okay, that star. And then around the outside of that star were other stars that went around it. And in the middle of one star was a maple leaf. In the middle of another star was for Mexico. Another star, I think it was like it might have showed palm trees and a volcano. That was Hawaii. And then another star for the Dominican Republic. Another star for the Philippines. No, it's not the Philippines.
Where is it?
They're all North America. What's that group of islands? Dominicans.
Okay.
The Dominicans.
The Caribbean.
The Caribbeans, yeah. And it had a star for them. It had a star for, I think, Brazil. So the stars around the outside of the 48-point star were stars of other countries that adopted the U.S. Constitution, and they live under the same governmental structure as the U.S. And so that was a Union flag. And all of North America is going to be on that flag. And maybe some other world states. All under the red, white, and blue, which in the future is going to represent freedom. And by adopting that flag, the countries have made a statement that they are for their people, and we accept the U.S. Constitution. And that meant everybody has the right to own and bear arms, which I think would be great. I mean, personally, you want to stop shootings? Everybody have a gun on their waist.
Right.
Yeah. There should be specific rules, okay? You should only be able to carry a certain caliber gun on you as an everyday weapon, So a certain caliber, probably like 22 caliber. You want anything bigger, get a permit, right? You don't need a 9mm on your fucking belt. But a 22 caliber is more than enough to ward off any attackers.
Right.
More than enough. Somebody's within like 10 feet and they're threatening you. A 22 bullet to the chest is going to do just as much damage as a 9mm to the chest. Right? Same thing. And plus you want a little extra kick, just get a longer shell. It's not rocket science, well, sort of. And so, have a regulation on how many, what you can wear on your hip for a caliper, everyday use gun. Okay. Also, and I have no problem if the holster that it gets strapped in has to be of a certain regulation. Like you have to be able to strap it in. It cannot be pulled out by somebody else. Stuff like that. Sure. So that you got to be able to. You can only unbuckle it from a certain angle, and that angle would be from your arm, the natural movement of your hand from this forward direction, and then only allowed to have so many bullets in the gun. I think the regulation could be anywhere from 9 to 12 bullets in your clip, no more, and that's just everyday use. As for like the rest of the guns, you're just not allowed to carry them in public unless you have a special permit or you're heading out for to the range to fire off a couple, or you're going hunting with the boys. That's the only reason to have those extra calibers in your vehicle. Outside of that, no permit necessary other than to prove that you're not mentally fucked up. That would be it. That would be like any normal-minded person should be able to own a gun and carry it every day.
Seems fair. Sure.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, there'd be no more fights in public No, because fucking, South Park did it best when they did an episode where everybody had a gun. Guess what? They solved a lot of shit in one episode because they were forced to listen to each other. It's like, first he like pulls the gun on his son. It's like, you do as I say. And then the son pulls out the gun. It's like, fuck you, Dad. It ain't happening. Oh, whoa, 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 whoa. Let's talk about this. It's like, oh, now we're going to talk. And so I just laughed my ass off, but that's true. I mean, fucking, you want to get pissed off at a person, I'll guarantee you, your eyes are going to drift to that gun hanging off of Buddy's hip. And then you're going to rethink what's going to come out of your mouth next. Really, and I say, have it out on display and within easy reach, just like the Old West. And I'll tell you, yeah, you will think twice. It's like, well, that guy, you don't have to, yeah, he's just a little guy, and if he punched me, it'd probably, feel like a mosquito bite, but that 22 caliber probably has extra bang in the shell, and that's going to hurt really bad if he decides to pull that out on me.
Who said, what was it? God created man, Colonel Colt made him equal.
Yes, and that is so true. That is so true. And that is where I stand on gun control. I don't even think there should be, other than whatever is designated for military use, no private individual should own it. No. It's like, I mean, military has access to your uranium bullets. Do I want my neighbor to have uranium bullets? Fuck no. No, of course not. And I don't want him to be able to have access to that 50 caliber gun either. Or 50 millimeter or whatever gun, right?
50 caliber probably, yeah. 50 millimeters like 2 inch.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't want my neighbors to have access to military weaponry. But I certainly do understand that my neighbors should have access to everyday civilian weaponry up to a certain caliber. I mean, I don't want them to have grenade launchers and rocket launchers. And if you do want that, and if you can get your hands on it, fine. Bury it out in the desert where nobody is going, where you're not going to disturb anybody with it. You see, it's kind of, I kind of stand with the Urantia book on a lot of stuff because the Urantia book clearly states that evil is necessary to exist alongside of good. Because without evil, how would our faith ever be challenged? Right. So we need evil in the world. But the problem is with this planet is that we're 75% evil and 25% in the light. That number needs to get flipped. I mean, I can handle 25% evil on the planet. Hey, no problem. Keeps you alert. Yeah. Keeps you, quick on your feet. Because, I mean, if we lived in a world of light and life, our minds would get soft. And I don't know about you, but I'd probably get really bored really fast. I mean, having somebody come in every once in a while and just upend the table, that kind of,
And I just thought about, you talked about the worlds of light and life. I think part of the process is getting it. By the time that they are there, they have gone through whatever it takes so that they are still being able to challenge themselves and grow. And
the challenges change.
And so on. Yes.
The challenges change. And, if we were to be taken from right where we are at in our evolution and taken right to like light and life and to the to almost evolution complete, we wouldn't know what to do with it. Yeah. We wouldn't know what to do with it. Some people might even commit suicide. We wouldn't know what to do with it. We have to evolve in that direction so that by the time we get there, there's a lot more information in our super consciousness. So there's a lot more information that we can access, and we would have different ideas of challenges. So, I mean, right now, some of our challenges are just downright childish. But then you get on another level of light and life, there's maybe a challenge might be to, go through a star without burning up. You know what I mean? I mean, we wouldn't be able to do that. We'd be no different than our ancestors when they started learning to work with metal. I mean, they were more scared of it than anything. So, I mean, how were they ever supposed to create anything? They were terrified of red hot metal. And they tried to teach them in Dalmatia. They started a little bit on metal in Dalmatia before the rebellion broke out, but they had just barely gotten man used to fire by that time. And, man was still a little skittish of fire at that time, but there are some people that started into metal, and they kept that within their group for years and years afterwards. I mean, the public, the world actually didn't get a general knowledge of metal working to the people, for up to 20. Up to about maybe 20,000 years ago. All of that stuff was done in secret cities and places like that. That was how the fallen kept control over man. They made sure that they segregated all the trades so that there was no cross training. And this is why trade stayed in the families. So that, if your father was a blacksmith, you were going to be a blacksmith. And that is how they were able to keep control over the technology, by keeping it compartmentalized. But once they got pretty much blasted off the planet, then that compartmentalization went with them. It's like I tell people, it's like the planet was cleaned up 2,000 years ago. The only beings that were left on this planet were beings that were here during the first original rebellion. Anybody that came after that, they either they died over the next 200,000 years, and mainly because of one catastrophe 52,000 years ago. That killed a lot of them off, and it wasn't until after that catastrophe that Adam and Eve showed up, because most of the technology and most of the fallen were destroyed because of that technology. And then they ended up dying off because they couldn't create new bodies for themselves. And then they ended up building Egypt, which gave them a second breath of life. But then that went to shit about 12,000 years ago with the Younger Dryas. And then started rebuilding. They kept the caste system. And then we get up to the Roman Empire, coming up through, Egypt rebuilt, but they had no idea what the technology. They just moved in and called them temples. And then the Roman Empire, and then look how fast the Roman Empire toppled after the Son of Man left. That's what people don't pay attention to. It went downhill fast, because they didn't have their demon advisors anymore. They were gone. The Son of Man took them off the planet, and they're going to go through trial. And so the first 1,000 years after the crucifixion, it's all on us. It's all on us. All that horrible shit that got done, that's on us. That is the demons. There were no demons. Just the leftovers from the original rebellion, and they were either insane or fucking on death's doorstep anyways, including a lot of the Midway creatures. They were all pretty much done. And so, and then the last one pretty much perished about 1,200 years ago. Yeah, last Midwayer. That was left over from the rebellion, gone, died in the desert alone. Poor bastard. Fuck him. Yeah. And the Havoc. I mean, he had a choice. Yeah. And for some odd reason, he thought the wiser choice was rebellion against his creator. Fuck him. And it was completely cleaned up. Things were actually starting to head in a good direction for us by 1200. And then John Dee in the 14th century opened a door into the demon realm and invited them all in and made deals for power. And we've been dealing with those fuckers ever since. Because I don't think he quite knew how to close the door properly.
Maybe not.
Yeah. And so they've been just coming back and forth. Or maybe he did close the door, and, maybe that's why we haven't been completely overrun. But a lot of them came through during that time. And Queen Victoria made deals with them so that she could be an immortal queen. There's rabbit holes to go down, people. There's rabbit holes.
Save that for Halloween after the election or something like that.
Yeah. So
yeah, we're coming up on what, an hour and 54 minutes here.
Holy shit, we probably should call it a day.
Yeah, so I'm just going to go through the we've been talking about what message should we send out to like the people going coming up to the election, and then before or after that. Situational awareness. Pay attention to what's going on. Get your trusted news sources, and also if you have any spiritual intuition, pay attention to that.
Yeah.
And just focus on positive thinking, situational awareness, like I tell in my program. Positive thinking, situational awareness, and you get to decide how to respond to everything you encounter.
And here's the thing: the Son of Man did not tell us to trust our feelings or our emotion, but he did tell us to trust our intuition.
Okay.
He did tell us to do that. He didn't tell us to trust our feelings. He told us to trust our intuition.
Trust our intuition.
Yeah.
Okay.
And whenever the apostles, like when he asked the apostles, who they thought he was, he did not ask them their feelings about it. He asked them what their intuition tells them about him. Nathaniel, without hesitation, was Son of God, by the way, when asked. Peter was like, well, they say that you're a great prophet and blah, blah, blah. And then Jesus was like, but what do you think? What does your intuition tell you? And Peter was like, well, I think you're a very good teacher. And I pretty much danced around it. He asked Nathaniel that question without hesitation. He said, Nathaniel looked Jesus straight in the eye, and he says, I believe you are the Son of God, brought to bring light to this world. Without hesitation, he said that shit. And Jesus was like, don't you breathe a word of what you just said to any of your brothers. You keep that shit to yourself. And Nathaniel did. And I think there was one other that said it too. And it was the same thing. Keep that shit to yourself. Don't tell them. They're not ready to hear that. And it wasn't until after the crucifixion, that Nathaniel said, without hesitation to everybody, he was the Son of God. And then I picture him giving the bird to about half of the other disciples and headed east. And he was like, you're not teaching what the master told us to teach. Yeah. I'm out of here. And he left. He went east. And and that's how we get the Eastern Orthodox Bible.
Okay. All right, we are done. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll catch you next time.
And yep.
Okay, that's end. And guess